Welcome to The Next Stage, the podcast where we turn up the house lights on the future of venue management. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is your go-to source for the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the venue and event management industry.
The amount of information and the amount of change and the amount of opportunity has never been greater.
We've literally broken down walls and we're looking at how can we create a more seamless experience.
There's customer demand for sustainability now.
On the forefront when it comes to venues that might not look like what you think of as a venue today.
Welcome back to The Next Stage, where we explore bold ideas, industry innovation, and the people shaping the future of venue management. I'm Joel Edmondson, CEO of the Venue Management Association, and today marks the final episode of the Momentus Innovators series. Host Steve Mackenzie returns for one last inspiring conversation, this time with Adam Polish, Global Design Director at Populous, the leading architectural firm revolutionising public assembly spaces around the world. From convention centres to major sports arenas, Populous specialises in designing spaces where people gather, connect, and create unforgettable experiences. Adam shares how the design landscape is shifting from maximising square footage to creating dynamic, flexible environments that truly enhance guest experiences. Learn how Populous approaches community-centric architecture, from the transformative BMO Center in Calgary to groundbreaking projects like The Sphere in Las Vegas. As this series concludes, I'm excited to announce that I'll be taking over as host with a fresh lineup of voices from across the venue management industry, sharing new insights, stories, and strategies for the next chapter of our industry's evolution. Let's dive in.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the latest in the Innovators series of our interviews. This time around, we're extremely lucky to have Adam Polish from Populous, the architect firm that builds just about everything that's being built around the world these days when it comes to the latest and greatest in convention centers and stadiums and the like. Adam's been a close friend and colleague for a number of years now, and so I thought it'd be a really good topic for us to touch on in the world of architecture. So before I steal all of your thunder, Adam, why don't you tell us a bit about Populous and about yourself?
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me, obviously. I've just really enjoyed our partnership. God, going on, it seems like half a decade now, so it's awesome. So Populous, we are the only global design firm that specializes in public assembly architecture. So public assembly architecture is essentially anything where you're moving large amounts of people through small and tight spaces. So think stadiums, arenas, performing arts centers, convention centers, but then also we plan events as well. So Super Bowls, World Cups, festivals, music festivals, esports events. And so truly from a global expertise standpoint, we really know how to do these buildings and how to do these buildings well. If you can imagine, there's quite complex, just from a public health and life safety standpoint, when you put that many people under one roof. So it does really take expertise to kind of get those buildings off the ground and make sure that they do get delivered on time and on budget and safely, of course. So I will say my role is I'm the global design director for our convention and exhibit hall practice, and I've had the pleasure now of working on projects on 6 continents for Populous of convention centers, and so it's really exciting because personally, I never would have thought that I'd be the design director for a convention center practice, but I really do think that convention centers are some of the most flexible and dynamic facilities in the world. And I really think COVID showed us that, the fact that you saw convention centers that were field hospitals, voting stations, supplemental housing for people experiencing homelessness, right? I just think that from a community building standpoint and a city making standpoint, convention centers really, really have a lot of potential to make cities better. And I think we're exiting a phase where they've had kind of a negative connotation as like the white elephants in some cities. And I really think that we are seeing that reputation turn around. And for projects like the BMO Center in Calgary or ICC Sydney, right? Like really different dynamic products that look so different than what convention centers used to look like. And meeting experience, guest experience, health and wellness, All of those things are just stuff that architects were not even talking about 10, 15, 20 years ago. So just lastly about Populous, we're headquartered out of Kansas City. That's our global headquarters in the United States. We do have main headquarters again in London and Brisbane, Australia. But also I'm taking this call out of Calgary right now, and we're very global. We have offices all over Europe now, Asia, and certainly in Australia. So just a really, really dynamic growing practice. And so it's really great to be here. And I just want to say at the moment that you and I met, Steve, we've pretty much identified that we are like operating in two parallel tracks of both of our organizations, of how you touch a lot of things that we don't touch. We touch a lot of things that you don't touch, but we definitely can see that there's value in us having these types of conversations. And so I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, thanks for that background. Yeah, Populous truly is a global organization, that's for sure. You touched, I think, a little bit on this in your opening remarks, but what would you say has changed in design the most in the last few years?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make this about COVID. I think we've talked about COVID to death, right? And weirdly, I don't think COVID changed much, really. I think what it did is it might have fast tracked a few things that were already happening, you know,
Right.
kind of call it the Amazon big box phenomenon, right? I think people were already leaning towards some of these things pre-COVID. And personally, as a designer, as an architect, I was even like, what is going to be the mechanism that's going to kind of put some of these trends in front of people in real time? And a global pandemic was not on my bingo card. But here we are. And I will say this industry, the meetings industry, is very resilient. You talk about September 11th, social media, Airbnb, Uber, all of these types of seismic social changes. And I will just say the meetings industry has found a way to design and thrive and innovate out of that. And I would say COVID is no different. So a few things, Steve, that I think are really changing is guest experience, guest experience, guest experience. And just in the convention center world, it's no secret, and it's kind of the business that you guys are in this type of space is major importance on exhibition halls, ballrooms, meeting rooms. We were seeing a major shift. I don't want to say away from that type of space, but a new type of space to supplement those spaces, right? Spaces inside of buildings that facilitate interaction, elicit conversation, give people access to natural light and outdoor space, comfortable places to sit, places to plug in your phone. I mean, these things seem minuscule, but think about how many conferences you've been to where people have no place to sit and you see people in the pre-function sitting there with their laptops, right? Just like an airport terminal. And so it's like, those are all things that we realized during the pandemic. It's like people didn't want to be crammed in a room for 8 hours with no natural light, with maybe, 2,000 of not their best friends, strangers, right? So how can you start to design
Right.
spaces, that alleviate that experience a little bit, give people more options to receive content? If you would have asked us during the pandemic, is digital content going to be around forever? I think everyone maybe would have said yes. But now what we're seeing is that the digital content is still there, but what it's done is it's forcing people to put more emphasis on the actual physical content, because that time value equation of somebody registering for a conference and going to your event, it has to be very clear that they're going to get something out of that event, right? And we all know that these types of events, these B2B and consumer to consumer shows and stuff, like, it's all about the interactions with the people. So from a design standpoint, it's how can you create more robust, organic, healthy interactions from the attendees while you're also still delivering on food and beverage, nice accommodations, walkability, relationships with the district. And so I would say, we always kind of joke. It's like, well, we're trending of like, you just buy the ballroom and it comes with the X hall. I would actually say now it's like you're actually probably buying the pre-function and then it comes with everything else, right? So you're starting to see
Right.
a
Yeah.
different type of relationship of the types of spaces that we design. And it's funny because they don't necessarily show up on like a spreadsheet, right? They're very unique. And I'm really happy that we'll be spending some time together in Calgary, so you can start to see what these types of spaces are, because they're not necessarily meeting spaces, but they're not just hotel lobbies, right? They are an interesting, flexible, adaptable type of space that we think is going to start taking the industry by storm. And just not one of our projects, but the new Seattle Convention Center, I think, does a great job of that. So there's a few buildings coming online that I think are really going to usher in this new generation of convention centers. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Just trying to understand how the whole concept of design impacts the meeting. And you're 100% right. It really does. So no longer are we just going into a big box and empty space and expecting it to fill our needs. So that's amazing. It also segues into the next question I have, which is, you've explained what changed in the last few years. What do you think's going to be, going forward from that? What's going to have the biggest impact, do you think, on the way that buildings are designed?
Oh man, okay, this is great. Thanks for asking this. A little bit of crystal ball going on here, but so I think it's interesting because sometimes these projects, and I'm not talking convention centers, I'm talking any kind of architectural project at scale, a scale that's multiple city blocks, for example. From the time that becomes a project, from the time that the city or a client or an owner or somebody is like, we need to do this, that time from when you actually hand over the keys could be anywhere from 6 to 10 years, right? That time from, and then, you buildings generally aren't mature, I would say, for another 5 years, right? So you don't really even know how your building operates for 15 years. So talk about a leap of faith, right?
Wow.
And so we always have to be thinking, 20, 30 years from now. And like, I mean, it's kind of scary, right? Like 20 years ago, the iPhone didn't exist, and who could plan for something like that, right? So it's not even like we're saying this is what's going to happen. What we're saying is you have to design enough adaptability in your project and in your organization to be able to kind of pivot with some of these trends. But I will say the arms race of square footage is over. Like no one is just building square footage to be bigger anymore. The cost of building is too expensive. Certain destinations, love it or hate it, have already won. Las Vegas, Orange County, Javits, McCormick Place, like your key, your key traditional convention destinations. They are the $2 million square foot halls, right? No one's ever going to beat that, and they shouldn't. So what I would say is this, something that we've been talking about is better is better. Not every destination has the money to do an expansion or the need for an expansion, but they're losing out on business just because the quality of the product is not aligned with what else is being offered in the market. And so we've been really working with a lot of destinations to kind of like future proof their buildings and their organizations of like diving into the data. What is the sales split? What is the utilization of your building? How many citywides could you actually go get, right? Or could you go get 24 smaller shows, right? So when you actually think about the business and then the type of space that it would require to go get that business, it's not as simple as just go build more X hall, go build more ballroom, go build more meeting room. It's like you need to build specific types of space that works in a specific type of way to go get that type of business, right? And so I would say what we're seeing is efficiency, adaptability, flexibility, and it's not just movable walls, right? It's about how can your organization adapt to attract a new type of business. And I think esports is a really interesting one, right? Esports, it's always evolving, it's always looking for a home. It has like Super Bowl level broadcasting requirements, right? So it's like there's a whole host of business in there that literally has no home. And it's like, I actually think convention centers are great opportunities to go get that type of business, right? And so I would say from a trend standpoint, it's not a specific thing. It's a mindset about being a little bit more flexible on what you're offering to the market and to your clients. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. And yeah, I would certainly, from what I've seen too, agree that the square footage or square meterage race is done. It's not about being the biggest is best anymore. It's about what best suits you, right? So, which kind of leads me to where I want to go next, which is you've talked a lot about how you guys. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see many of your presentations, and I love the way you sort of paint the picture of where people's mindsets are in the middle of here,
Yeah.
and you guys are in outer space basically with trying to come up with these new concepts and ideas all the time. How from a client perspective though, what are you hearing them asking you for? Are they are they right out there in outer space too, or are they a fair way back?
Good question. That's a good question. There's two types of clients, and I'm going to say this in a very polite way, right? It's not bad. It's just there's certain destinations, I would say, where the building is city operated or city ran. So you might have a general manager that is a city employee that he might have been working with the building for 20 years already. He's got 10 years left. He kind of just doesn't want to rock the boat and kind of move along with his career. That's okay. And I would say in those types of relationships, we have a really robust relationship with like the DMO or the sales organization that is part of the building or something along those lines. But I will say, some clients that have a little bit more flexibility that might be operating their facility from either like a pseudo government type organization like Calgary Municipal Land Corporation or Houston First, for example, those types of clients are really empowered to go out to the market and do something different, right? They don't have that same kind of, I don't want to say baggage, but they don't have that same kind of history of like, this is how we've always done it. They have a bit more flexibility to kind of shape a new path forward. And so I would say, well, what we're seeing right now is, first of all, the days of just keeping people locked in your convention center are done. Like, remember the old mantra of like, keep people in the building as long as possible, because like once they leave, they're never coming back. Actually, what we've been seeing and what we think clients are really looking for, and this goes into this community question, right, is how can we show and demonstrate what these buildings do for the community, right? And so what that means is instead of trying to design a building where you're just trying to keep 10,000 people in an X hall for 8 hours, you want to design a building that sits within a district, and that district can be populated with food and beverage, retail, mixed use. Some cities like Houston, there's a Major League Baseball stadium right next door. There's an NBA arena right next door, outdoor space, right? So what we're really doing is kind of designing and trying to fit something into an equation that is like a healthy environment for the community. And the economics are always hard to prove, but what we do know is that if you go to a local restaurateur that has a local establishment next to a convention center, and he can say, I don't know why, but I know when the convention center is full, my business is better, right? And so I would say our clients, no one anymore is just going to say we need to expand or get bigger just because we need to. We need to work on telling a better story of how these buildings actually support a community. And even from the economics, Steve, it's like, your average citizen of Kansas City, they just see the convention center as something that visitors go to. I would never even experience. What they don't see is all that money that comes into your city through the convention center is money that typically wouldn't be spent in your city, right? So instead of just kind of thinking about this convention center as this thing on an island, we really have to think about it, how it relates in this ecosystem. And I would say outside of any types of program space or anything like that, we're really doing a lot of work right now helping clients, and I'm talking cities, destination management organizations, really help them kind of re-message where their building sits within their city and their community and the overall meetings industry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you're certainly. I think again, it's very topical. This whole idea of a precinct versus just a convention center. It's about the rest of the places around, and as you say, involving the community. So that's cool that you're hearing that from your clients too. How do you reckon or how do you bridge the gap between your wildest dreams of design and then the realities and practicality of what can actually be achieved?
Yeah. Well, a lot of conversations, and there's a lot of trust, I would say. And trust happens with relationship building. And I would say that's Populous. We work in cities all over the world. I will say what we never do is show up to a city and say, we know what's best for your city. There's a huge ramp up there of getting to know the client, the organization. Generally, I would say 95% of projects that Populous does, we have very strong local partnership with architecture and engineering firms and feasibility consultants. So I would say by the time we are having these conversations about maybe some tricky things, there is an inherent level of trust there, right? But from a Populous standpoint, Steve, you are part of this year, our Imagine That conference that we do, right?
Right.
Where
Yep.
we invite clients, DMO representatives, executives, government officials, and meeting planners. We invite them to Kansas City for a 3-day workshop with our architecture staff and our designers, and we just ask questions, right? And we have no agenda, but just asking them, what are you seeing? What's keeping you up at night? Where do you think this is all going? You know, the one last year, Steve, interesting, like owners were really topical on security, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I didn't think security was going to kind of be at the forefront of people's minds. And then obviously
Right.
you guys as a technology firm, security is not just physical security, right? There's the technological the technological aspect of it, of 2FA, hacking prevention. And then it's like, and even part of our workshop this year, we had an AI component, right? And it's like, okay, so now we're talking about
That was
all of this
incredible.
stuff, right? And it's
Yeah.
just like, so the fact that our clients are saying, like, it would be so easy for us to come to a client and say, this is what you should do. But again, that's not how our business works, and it shouldn't work that way. So for us, every year, every other year that we do this Imagine That conference, to have the industry come to us and say, hey, this is kind of what's keeping us up at night, take it or leave it. And then that gives us enough ammunition with all of our projects and all of our other markets that we touch to say, well, hey, they're doing this in Major League Baseball, but they're doing this in FIFA soccer. Maybe we can take some lessons from there, and we can start to create kind of a new, like a new opportunity or a new paradigm for some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, I was very privileged to be part of Imagine That late last year, and those workshops were incredible. The fact that you can take those ideas and turn them with
Yeah.
AI and turn them into models the next day. That blew my mind. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Really, really great. And so you've talked about a couple of big projects like the BMO Center in Calgary. I can't wait to see that in June for the grand opening. It's going to be amazing. But are there any other big projects you're working on that you can share with us before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you everything, because I will say that this is the most activity we've seen in the market in a long time. And that's really good. I would say sports probably came back, private ownership came back relatively quickly after
Right.
COVID. Public sector is a little bit slower, rightfully so. And I would say we are probably touching all 4 corners of the country right now in very meaningful ways. But what I think is the most exciting is some projects that are starting back up. So the Orange County Convention Center, that's something that we were working on before the
Yep.
pandemic started. It went on hold. We just kicked that off last week, which is really exciting. And it's also interesting to now see and be with the client and them asking us these same questions. What's changed, right? And it's like, well, let's talk about it, right? So I think that that's really exciting. We are working on some substantial work in Texas. I can't really say the destination right now, but when I say substantial, we're talking numbers with billions in front of it, which is really exciting.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's not just convention center work. It's this district infrastructure tying these ecosystems together, which I think is really exciting. But I do just I do want to give a shout out to the Sphere in Las Vegas, right? That is a Populous design project. And I bring
Wow.
that up not to take credit for it, but the technology in the Sphere like didn't exist when we started designing that project, right? The MSG client said, you just got to believe us here. We will put the right people in the right situation to design the LEDs and the sound and stuff around the architecture. And I just say that because if you haven't been there,
Oh, yeah,
it's
it's
just
incredible.
it is
Yeah.
incredible. It's hard to wrap your head around. And I always bring it up in conversations like this because the technology is not going away. It is on the ground floor. This technology is going to affect sports, entertainment, movies, gaming, meetings. It is live music. It is going to change how people receive content live. And so I say that because you're now going to start seeing versions of this type of thing all over the world. We're already doing the second sphere in London right now. And I know that there's plans, not necessarily through Populous, but I know there's plans that this is going to be replicated in multiple destinations, right? So I'm just saying, not really specific right now, but we absolutely are on the forefront of some really, really dynamic work when it comes to the future venues, right? Venues that might not look like what you think of as a venue today. And I think that that's really exciting that we're in a position to really help create this kind of next generation of facility. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard someone recently say that, there's the venue world, it's changed by the sphere. It's going to be the before sphere and after sphere sort of world where that's totally making us rethink the way that we build buildings. So it's exciting to hear that you've got lots going on, and very, very, very exciting to know that we're going to see a lot of innovation happening in this area. So on that note, Adam, look, thanks so much for your insights. We could talk for hours, I know.
Yeah, for sure.
It's such an interesting topic, but this is great, and look forward to catching up with you in Calgary soon.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, Steve. This is always a pleasure. It'd be good to see you in person.
That's a wrap on the final episode of the Momentus Innovators series here on The Next Stage. A big thank you to Adam Polish for sharing his insights on guest experience, design innovation, and the future of public assembly spaces. And of course, a very special thank you to Steve Mackenzie for guiding us through this incredible series of conversations with industry trailblazers. As we close this chapter, stay tuned for the next era of The Next Stage, featuring a fresh lineup of voices from across the venue management industry, exploring new ideas, challenges, and strategies shaping the future of our field. If you've enjoyed this series, be sure to subscribe and share the Next Stage podcast with your network, because the conversations about innovation, collaboration, and growth in our industry are just getting started. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay inspired.